Welcome back to Val Verde Broadcasting. My name is Duncan Casey. I'm here with Richard Jackson of the Jackson 12. And we are here to do our usual film review show, what we normally do. And obviously, as you can tell, I have not prepared an intro. I don't have some snappy phrase that I always roll out. We're just here. And we talk. We are both professional filmmakers. I'm an actor and producer. Richard is a cinematographer, videographer extraordinaire, and director, in fact. And we just like to chat about movies. So we thought we're going to sort of revive our pre-recorded content. For those of you who are familiar with Val Verde Broadcasting, you know that we were doing this pre-pandemic, and we're trying to get back to it now. So here we go. We're going to talk all things, well, some things, Black Widow today. Richard, have you seen Black Widow, the film?
I have seen Black Widow, the film. I dropped real money on it, and a not insignificant amount, because that's the world we live in now.
And I dropped Richard's password details into Disney Plus and watched it myself.
I split it with myself and the venerable Ivan split it.
Very good.
Because that's how we'll have a discussion about renting movies at full price at home these days, isn't it? But anyway, let's talk about the Black Widow, the movie. What did you think about Black Widow, the movie?
The movie. So I mean, look, do we need to?
That is so, I love it. That's a review on its own. It's like, a sort of dejected sigh and a qualifier.
I mean, do we need to? Firstly, do we need to summarise the plot? Not really. I suppose it's we all know it's set after Civil War, or in between Civil War and not Endgame, the Infinity War. So
Infinity War, yeah, but with the origins of her blonde hair.
Yes, quite. And it's sort of it's a bit of a hand wave origin story for Black Widow. It feels a bit perfunctory and after the fact, and obviously being caged in a certain time period like that tends to rob it of any kind of intrigue or mystery, really, on the part of the characters anyway. But it's essentially a film about the period in Black Widow's life where I guess she supposedly went underground and smashed up big flying fortresses.
Yeah, this is it. It has notes of crowbar.
Indeed,
I think
indeed. But I did see it, and I just think it is at this point it's quite sort of, it's like tepid vanilla ice cream or something. It just isn't. There's nothing wrong with it. If you're into that and then you enjoy it, good for you. I've always said this, but for me, it didn't serve. It didn't serve any real purpose. I like all the people in it. I like all the filmmakers. I like the studio. I like all of that. Yes. There's nothing against them. Yeah. For me, it just felt perfunctory. And I think I thought Endgame, for it's got end in the fucking title, was going to be like a proper mark in the sand where we were then not really going to do, but it isn't. It's like it's just end of phase 3 and now we're on to phase 4, and it's like I don't care about any of that. Well,
that's the thing. This is the thing. If you're gonna hew so closely to comics, the interminable endlessness of it all is part of that. And then they really now have to make us fall in love with a whole new set of characters. I mean, I think the thing with this is, it's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, in terms of its filmmaking, it's extremely high end. Like, it looks lovely. Like, it looks great. There's nothing remarkable or experimental or kind of you haven't seen before, but it's one of those lovely, really expensive, anamorphic movies. It's somewhat in the Marvel House style. It's got lovely nighttime scenes. The lighting's beautiful. It's edited well. It's kind of boring. As a baseline, as a very baseline description, it's kind of boring, and it has the kind of prequelitis thing of just like, well, okay, she's dead.
Well, so. Exactly. It robs it of any kind of agency, because we know exactly. We know she can't be dead by the end of it. So falling out of the sky without a parachute, not a problem, because we know full well that's So it's it just and like get people who can do Russian accents, for fuck's sake. I mean that really
nobody can do it. Ray Winston can't do a Russian accent. Like David Harbour is doing a kind of wacky cartoon So it's cool, and he's great. I love him as fat schlubby Soviet Captain America is awesome, and because he's lovable because he's got that kind of self-confidence and stuff, despite the fact he's a bit washed up, and that's lovely.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh, have you seen Midsummer?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love Midsummer. I thought it was fantastic, like on so many levels, and I thought Florence Pugh was great.
Yeah, I did. I think it perhaps wasn't the film I thought I was sitting down to watch, but I did think, in retrospect, that it's a very good film. It's a very unnerving and unsettling film, and I thought she was very good in it. I think it's too long, but I still think it's great as a film, and I think she's brilliant. Yeah, and she's good in this too.
Yeah, and they seem to be setting her up for the Julia Louis-Dreyfus thing. Yes. Was that for those of you who've seen Captain America: Winter Soldier? Let's spoil that as well. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I think they're called the Revengers or something. They're kind of like the Black Ops Dark Avengers that she's setting up, and she's got kind of US agent. This was supposed to come first. This was shot first. This intro to the character, but we saw the Captain America one first. Came out first, but they're functionally identical, so it doesn't really matter because she's the anti-Nick Fury, right? Or the evil Nick Fury or whatever. Anyway, Florence Pugh's great. The whole cast great. Rachel Weisz great. Ray Winston not so much. And you have this kind of feeling of like just having something that's been crowbarred in, because if maybe this same story came out before Endgame and stuff, it might carry more weight. I don't know.
There's no reason why it couldn't have come out in the period in which it's set, right? Like, I mean, why couldn't this have come out in 2015, 16, whenever that was, after Civil War?
Yeah, it kind of feels like an afterthought. Because they talked about a Black Widow film for ages, and I think they got a lot of shtick for not doing a female-led movie, and then they've decided to do it like way after the fact, and it's like good, good for you and everything, but female-directed movie as well. But it's like, I don't know. I went along with lots of it, but there is a lot of like looking at my phone. Something I found I can't remember which one. Do you remember which movie it was where they show her kind of spy training backstory where she's like in the ballet school and stuff?
Yeah, when she's talking to.
Oh God.
Yeah, when she talks about the sterilization.
Well, they set up this kind of awful thing where they're kind of, they're forcibly sterilized to stop them from reproducing, of course. They had the stuff in the ballet school was quite sinister and quite kind of otherworldly, and it was kind of like this place out of time where bad things happened. And then in this, it's just wacky spy school, and they've referenced the forced sterilization as a kind of knockabout joke.
Yeah.
And it's like, when will you have babies? Well, duh, they took my uterus away. And it's like, God, that was like a really... I do not like Age of Ultron, but that was like a really heavy bit of plot, and it's kind of informed that character's tragedy. And then in this, her and her younger sister sort of made a joke about it and high fives.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of told it. It's in the context of showing up David Harbour, isn't it? In the sense of like, because isn't he going like, okay, that's enough, that's disgusting, and she's like, they pull out your ovaries and throw them against the wall or whatever, and it's just like. Yeah, I mean, I guess it was a bit when juxtaposed against, because it's used. I think it's one of those things that's used in that context when she's sort of confessing to. Well, she's talking to Bruce Banner, and sort of talking about, they're sharing their faults and why they, want to be together but can't be together, and it's a sort of very poignant moment. And then in this, it's because again, I suppose it'd be interesting to sort of think about it in the terms of like. The reflection of the male character that's in the scene seems to dictate how that subject is talked about, and it's kind of like it's like
yeah.
I don't know.
And that's not. I know what you mean, and it's kind of. I found that it's kind of just tonally off, and then I thought all the things that have been set up for that character. I thought it would be a kind of somewhat heavy kind of character thing, because you can do that, but it was basically the Black Widow family attack the Death Star was the movie.
Yeah,
because they go and blow up an evil helicarrier, and
it's like, I mean, we're expected to take seriously the idea that she can't attack Ray Winston because she can smell him.
It's Directive 4.
Yeah.
She can't act against an officer at OCP, so she headbutts a table until she can.
She does it in just one hit. She knows how to sever the nose. And then she literally puts her nose back together, and that's it. Nothing is made of that again.
This also suggests that her real tragic backstory is that throughout the Infinity War and Endgame, she didn't have a sense of smell.
Well,
so that's the true tragic backstory for Black Widow.
Yeah.
She couldn't smell that sandwich she's eating in that one bit in Endgame.
I mean, I think because it's sort of made out to be this kind of nasty enforced spy school thing. They're all sort of doing gun moves in lockstep with each other in a room, and they're under some sort of control that's all kind of hand waves and not particularly dwelled on, and he can control them from his little fortress in the sky or whatever. And it's kind of like, but I mean, firstly, it robs Black Widow of kind of, I thought she was called Black Widow, but no, she's a Black Widow. There are an army of them who have had nothing to do with anything up until now. It just so happens that this is the point in which they've sort of chosen to enter the story and then exit it quite quickly. And it's just, once again, it's kind of more, and say nothing of Olga Kurylenko in her, like I was like, oh, Olga Kurylenko's in it, cool, I like her, but really it just boils down to her taking a helmet off once or twice with the sort of with a prosthetic bonk eye, and then and just to look kind of either confused or upset, and then that's it.
That was a massively signposted thing as well. It's kind of like, oh, I blew up a little girl, and it's like, well, that's Taskmaster, because they've put Taskmaster in a kind of masculinized costume to hide that it's a woman, so we could never guess that it's Ray Winster's daughter. And also, he treats all the women in his life. He makes them into automatons and etc. And it's like, well, that's really massively signposted, though. I mean, it was not a very good bit of sleight of hand at all.
No, so it just, again, it's hard, because it's hard to make a story like that and have it have weight when it's not referenced in any of the subsequent stuff, and it feels like a sort of whistle stop, side tour for Black Widow, like on her way to an Endgame, and it's kind of like, but you're trying to also crowbar in there her family and her relationship with her sister and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, but what, like, in order for that to have any weight, it should have been present in everything else, and it's kind of like, it wasn't.
It's another tonal zigzag as well, because they talk about, we finally hear what happened with her and Hawkeye in Budapest,
right?
And the whole thing was like, you and I remember Budapest very differently, and that's treated as a wacky knockabout story that we'll never see. And then it's like, oh no, I was actually killing a man and his daughter to stop a network of child slaves. And it's like, oh, so kind of quite fun and knockabout.
Explain how Hawkeye remembers that differently.
Because it's a bit like in the safe house, it's kind of like, what kind of gun made that? And she's like, it was some arrows. And it's like, yeah, good. And a call back to Marvel's worst superhero. Who's getting a Disney Plus show, by the way.
But of course he is. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not...
I just love your whole demeanour of this one. It's so dejected. I love it. It's just a supercut of your size just sums up 2.5 hours with this fucking film.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't hate it. It was one of those things where it's not like it's not boring.
Totally
it's not boring like something like Thor: The Dark World or anything. I wasn't fed up with it, but it just is less than the sum of its parts, unfortunately. And there's some really lovely moments in there, but it does. Do you know what? Okay, so it does. The great stuff is David Harbour, Scarlett Johansson. What's the sister's name? Actress again? Sorry.
Florence Pugh.
Thank you. And Rachel Weisz obviously sitting down and having their moments together as this sort of weird, dysfunctional, not really a family.
Yes, that lovely, really that was some of the
and
best.
David Harbour and Florence Pugh especially, I think, had a really lovely chemistry. But it does what Aquaman does, which is like, right, we're into a sort of character beat here. Need to really get on with the action. I know. The wall explodes, and it's just like,
right.
I'm a bad guy. Look, okay, let's fight now. And it's just like, what? And that just happens over and over again. It happens in it's just sort of because a lot has been made. I think, wasn't it? Did Red Letter Media say that, or someone anyway, that like people have said that this was prevised years before it was made. So all the action stuff was prevised way in advance of a script or a director or casting or anything. It was just they do this. They put together the action that they want to happen, and then they essentially fit a story around it.
And then in crowbar it
and that's indicative of that, right? Which is that, like, okay, we've hit minute whatever 48, so now we have to have an action set piece. But we're in the middle of a heart-to-heart, so let's just blow up the house.
The wall has to explode. Because that's the thing. Do you remember in Total Recall? Like, they signpost that brilliantly. The guy with the pill is like, the walls of reality come crashing down. And as soon as he makes that choice, the walls cave in. That's clever. There's a nice comment on how these narratives evolve. This is just like you say, well, we need to get to the previs now, so sorry.
Bang! Right? Literally at one point the lights just go out and then the wall explodes and it's like, okay, I mean, you know.
Well, let's get... just to be clear, because I've just sort of been going in on it. There's loads of really stuff in it. It's really nicely made. It's a high-end film. It's not the worst of the Marvel films by a long chalk. I just found it a bit kind of empty, and on that basis, it sort of bored me.
Would you say that
the family stuff is really good?
Do you think that is also the context of where it's come? Because if it had come out more in line with the original stuff, so if it was around the time of your Thors and your Captain Americas and stuff, like I think it would have played better. I think it is, a lot of it is down to where it's falling. You know?
I do. That's been playing on my mind the whole time. Yeah, massively. I really wonder. But the fact is it didn't, and this is what we watched. And I think that, the setup of them in, where are they, like Ohio or something? Like, that's based on fact. There were Russian sleeper families in Canada. I think it was called the Illegals Program, and they're like the Bezrukov family and stuff. There's a bunch of them. It really happened in that TV show. The Americans is based on that, and they're doing a version of that with David Harbour looks like Bill Gates at the beginning with their 90s haircuts and stuff. And the idea of a forced kind of constituted family, I find that really interesting. And they end up sort of like questioning that because it was only for 3 years and stuff, but you can see that they really sort of long for it, really. And David Harbour and Rachel Weisz as the kind of surrogate parents who've done it out of duty for sinister reasons, did actually long for it, and they do consider themselves a family, and they're all that each other has. Oh, look, the walls exploding. But all that stuff really good, and the stuff, the interplay between Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson, really good. Lots of great side characters and stuff. And again, it's a waste of my time to comment on the production value.
Yeah,
it's a fucking megabucks Disney movie, so it's going to look good, and it does. But it's also kind of unremarkable. I mean, there's some slightly wonky compositing at the end. Did you notice that? When she's jumping out of when it's all blowing up and they're falling out of the sky. Some slightly weird composites, and I don't know what's gone on there. I mean, the world of modern VFX is far beyond my understanding on art.
I think a lot of the violence in it felt consequence free. There's obviously a bit of blood here and there, but it's not. It's things like people jumping away from giant explosions and stuff, and like you said, falling out of the sky, literally. And it's kind of like, okay, like she survives just jumping out of like a giant free fall. And it's kind of just that yeah. I mean, I know that's what you're supposed to expect from a superhero film, but this, more than any, I think, of the Marvel films, was a good setup to be. This could have been a really good Cold War spy thriller-esque. I'm not saying it's set in the Cold War, but it could have had the vibes of a Cold War spy thriller with some cool action stuff in it, but grounded action. Because she's just a person. Like, she's not.
That's what the Captain America: The Winter Soldier, right? The debut film for the Russos, like that. Really, like, don't get me wrong, it has some completely outlandish action stuff. It's about like giant flying aircraft carriers crashing into buildings, but that had some really quite weighty kind of stuff in it, and it was referencing kind of 70s cinema and all the President's Men, and it was doing things about kind of overreach and surveillance state and modern geopolitics in a kind of soft touch Marvel way, but it felt like it had a bit of heft, and that's a film that this takes its cues from and is led off from and everything, and doesn't really have any of it. It really kind of turns into the end of Star Wars when they're beating up the soldiers on the spaceship and blowing it all up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I kind of wanted something with again, Winter Soldier is probably one of my favorite of these Marvel films. Yeah. Even though it's kind of essentially connective tissue between other things, it's just so good, and it has some heft in it. Like, as far as a populist action movie would. And this just doesn't have that, and I'd hope something in that vein, because that film has a lot of low key stuff in it. There's big action beats, but it's people hanging out in apartments and talking spy stuff and going down to secret bunkers and whatever, in between the shit blowing up and the back.
Well, the point is that shit blowing up is as a result of like literally, especially the ending. You can have an ending with giant flying helicarriers crashing into buildings because that's happening because of what we're saying about Captain America. That's as much about him as it is about the sort of procedural element of telling a story, and so it has some weight. And I know that you could say the same thing about Black Widow, and that you could say, yeah, but that's happening because she needs to confront her past or whatever. But it's kind of like, yeah, but nothing. Again, when it's more about her smashing her nose into a desk so she can stop smelling Ray Winston and therefore kick his ass, it's like, well, I'm sorry, but you've kind of lost me.
I'd like to say you're taking that out of context, but you're really not. It's the kindest thing I can say.
I love all the people involved, and like I really, Scarlett Johansson is probably one of my favourite actresses, actually, and I think she's done some incredible work that we've talked about. I think Black Widow is great as a character, and I think she's done great things with it. But I mean, she's done so much more exciting stuff, even things like Lost in Translation and Under the Skin,
Ghost World,
all that stuff is just amazing. So she's someone with huge bona fides and everything, and I love seeing her do amazing stuff, and I'm kind of keen for her to get out of doing Black Widow, to be honest, because I'm kind of like, I want to see more cool stuff from her. And
she'll go off and do a fucking John Glazer art house movie in Glasgow.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? She can do whatever the fuck she wants and do it well. And she's given this cartoon, essentially comic character, real pathos and real weight over the years. And she gets a swan song, and that's lovely. Unfortunately, it did not. My tickle was unpickled, my boat unfloated.
Yes. Well, it doesn't feel like a swan song when we already know the character's dead. I mean, I actually felt Endgame was very much her story as much as it was anyone else. I think she really carried that film in a lot of ways. But
it's great because they show her to be carrying the weight of what's going on because she's organising all the remaining Avengers from the base and stuff, and it's just horrible.
Exactly.
And, that's
Anyway,
unnecessary.
Well, there we are. I think we have we've shot all the shite we're going to shoot on this one, so let's call it a day. But thank you everyone for listening in. We are going to try and do these more on the regular. If it's your first time and you've never been here before, please leave us a comment, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're listening to this on podcast, then please chuck us a review, because that helps tickle their algorithms and get other people to listen to it. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.
Naroda, nordest naroda, znamiać się brytru.